All right, let's jump right in. What if I told you that inside just 5 short poems, there's a secret blueprint for how to live a creative life? I'm not just talking about how to make art. I'm talking about how to survive it, how to pass on what you know, and maybe even how to cheat death itself.
I know it sounds like a pretty wild claim, doesn't it? But that's the big question we're going to tackle today. We're about to dive into what is essentially a hidden manifesto discovered within the works of a poet named Avalok.
In this manifesto, it has a name, the Creative Covenant. Think of it as a kind of pact an artist makes with their art, with the world, and with themselves. And the really fascinating part, it's all built on paradoxes, on ideas that seem to totally contradict each other, but when you put them together, that's where the magic is.
So, our journey into this covenant starts with the first and maybe the biggest paradox of them all. It's all about the act of creating. And the covenant says that to get true control over your art, you first have to master the art of letting go completely. This idea comes from the very first poem. The artist is just watching as ideas shape up and meanings sort of manifest themselves. It's like they're not really building the thing, they're just a channel for it. They are going with what they call the flow, with a capital F, some force that's bigger than them. And their job in all of this? To just spell check and hit save. And this is where that paradox just snaps into focus. I mean, on one hand, giving yourself up to the flow sounds super humble, right? You're just a vessel. But there's another way to read it. Maybe the artist has spent so many years, so many thousands of hours perfecting their craft that the hard part is now second nature. It's not passive at all. It's an active surrender, something you can only do after you've achieved total control. And what's really wild is this isn't just a poetic idea, it's actually grounded in hard science. Neuroscientists have identified 2 major networks in our brain. You've got the default mode network, or DMN, that's your brain's idea generator, its daydreaming center, that's the flow. Then you have the cognitive control network, or CCN, that's the focused problem-solving part, that's your spell check. Now, usually, these 2 are like oil and water. When one's on, the other's off. But a creative flow state, that's one of those rare, magical moments where they're both firing at the same time. You're literally daydreaming and solving problems simultaneously. Okay, so let's move on. We get the process, but what fuels it? Passion. But the covenant gives us a pretty stark warning here. This isn't some gentle, warm and fuzzy kind of passion. Nope. This passion is ruthless. And it asks for a whole lot in return. Yeah, just let that sink in for a second. The poem this comes from, Artist's Tools, talks about the easel being a prop of compassion and brushes being like feathers of empathy. And then it just hits you with this line. The canvas isn't for paint. It's a site for bleeding. The poem ends by saying, art is ruthless without pity. The work doesn't care if you're tired or if you're hurting, it takes what it needs. So, if art is that brutal, how on earth do you survive it? Well, the Covenant offers this incredible psychological tool. Another paradox, of course. It's called ruthless compassion. You need that ruthlessness, that absolute fierceness, to chase down your artistic vision without backing down. But at the same time, to survive all that bleeding, you have to show yourself compassion. You have to practice a kind of loving kindness towards yourself, or you'll just burn out. It's the only way. And believe me, this bleeding is not just a metaphor. The source material lays out what it calls the Faustian bargain for the artist, and the costs are real. Psychologically, your creative obsession can just eat up your personal life. Relationally, all that time and energy can isolate you from others. And of course, financially, well, we all know the passion versus paycheck struggle. So why do it? The passion is the justification. It's the reason for choosing a life that might be messy and hard, but is also unbelievably meaningful. All right, so you've learned to surrender to the flow, and you've somehow survived the ruthless passion. What's next? Well, the third part of the covenant is all about passing on what you've learned, but not in the way you'd think. This isn't about making copies of yourself. It's about setting the next generation of creators completely free. The poems flat out reject that old school top-down master-apprentice model, you know, the one on the left, that just creates followers. Instead, they champion what's called a horizontal approach, which you see on the right. Here, everything is centered on the student, and the one and only goal is to help them become fully independent. And this whole teaching philosophy is captured in this simple 3-step idea from the poem To My Students.
The knife here is a metaphor for the student's raw talent. Step 1, you had the knife. The teacher has to first admit the talent was always there, it belongs to the student. Step 2, I just sharpened it. The teacher's role is small, it's functional. And step 3, the most important part, it's still your knife. The whole point is to make yourself useless, to give them the tools and then get out of the way.
So what does the teacher become in the end? This line from a poem about teaching someone to swim just says it all. The student, she's going to go on and find her shore. She's going to create a new world. And the teacher's final form? A shadow. But it's not a dark thing. It's a joyful, supportive presence. You're there for them, but you're not blocking their sun. And that connection, that's the antidote to that lonely, ruthless life we talked about earlier. And that brings us to the final and most mind-blowing part of the covenant. We've looked at the process, the passion, and the teaching. Now we're going to see how all those pieces combine to make the most audacious claim of all, a practical way to achieve immortality.
So the final poem sets this epic scene. Imagine this. Yama, the Hindu god of death, shows up at the artist's store to collect them. But the artist isn't scared. Not at all. They look death right in the eye, like an equal, and treat his arrival like, well, like an annoying interruption.
The artist just calmly says, "My painting is not yet complete." And Death, who seems to respect the rules of art, says, "Okay, I'll come back when it's finished." And this is the checkmate. The artist just laughs and hits him with this incredible paradoxical punchline. By never being finished, the artist gets to live forever.
Now, hold on, this isn't just a witty comeback. It is the logical conclusion of this entire covenant we've been unpacking. The work is never done because of those 3 pillars we just talked about. The process, that flow, it's an infinite well. The passion, that sight for bleeding, means there is always more of yourself to pour into the work. And crucially, the pedagogy means the art continues through your students, who go on to create their own new worlds. And all of this presents us with a profound choice. On one side, you have Leonardo da Vinci's famous and kind of tragic idea that art is never finished, just abandoned. A view that's all about the final product and maybe a feeling of failure. But the covenant offers us a totally different, process-oriented view. The artist doesn't abandon the work. They ensure the process itself continues forever. They outsmart death not by finishing one thing, but by committing to an endless cycle of creation.
And so in the end, by surrendering to an infinite process, by paying the ruthless price, and by teaching others to carry that fire forward, the artist does something amazing. They transform their single, finite life into an endless, infinite creative lineage. That lineage becomes the finished work of art. Which, of course, brings us right back to you, because this covenant isn't just for painters and poets and some old book. It's a guide for anyone who makes anything. And it leaves us all with one final question to ponder. What is the work you will choose never to abandon? What is your unfinished art?